Oh, very cool.
He surprised us yet once again.
Like I always say, it's always a variation on a theme. I love it. So, hi, gang. From that tone, and you can hear it, we are Monkey Business, and this is your weekly dose. I am Chris. With me, as always, is Billy and Tanya. And in the studio, as well, is our producer, Sherry. Hello, Sherry.
Hello.
Well, hello, Sherry.
It doesn't have
quite the same ring.
That's the one.
So we got to do a Steve Perry channeling. Oh, there you go. That's even worse. It's like
You
nails
don't
on
like that one,
chalkboard.
Sherry? Okay.
All right, gang. So we're
man,
going to jump
it's
right
really
into the
loud.
business. We want to do our sponsor shout-outs for Knox and Selena's, our favorite guys over at the Village Gate. Love you always and appreciate your support. Our perennial sponsor, First Print Comics, Mike and the guys over on Buffalo Road. A big nod to one of our newest sponsors, The Great Escape Room over on University Avenue. And as always, Heather from Wibbly Wobbly, Timey Wimey. We love you guys, and we're looking forward to meeting Caitlin Blackwood, the young Amelia Pond from Doctor Who. No big Patreon shout-outs this week, but hey, we're got the ball rolling. We got people who are signing up, so please, 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 if you're interested in supporting us and helping this podcast grow, www.patreon.com/FC3ROC. And we got lots of opportunities for you to support us for as cheap as $1 a month, $12 a year. You can start getting a sneak peek into the behind the scenes of the Flower City Comic Con.
You can really see and read what the cats are doing that Sherry's trying to
Yeah,
herd.
because you're gonna get access to Tanya's blog, you're gonna get access to mine, the director's blog. You're gonna get guest announcements first, all the good stuff. So just for
That's how I phrased it.
That's it.
Greetings from one of the cats that Sherry's trying to herd.
There you go. Very cool. So we're gonna jump right into it. We have an interview today. Jennifer K. Stuller. Jennifer K. Stuller is a writer, media critic, and feminist pop culture historian. She is the author of Ink-Stained Amazons and Cinematic Warriors, Superwomen in the Modern Mythology. Say that 5 times really fast.
I was just thinking the same thing.
And the editor of Fan Phenomena, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She has been published in BBC News, Bitch Media, and Geek Monthly. Additionally, Stuller is co-founder and former board president of Geek Girl Con. A sought-after speaker, she brings her messages of media literacy and positive fandom to a variety of audiences and speaks about geek culture and activism at conferences, libraries, and schools in the U.S. and internationally. Stuller is a rebellion built on hope, and it is great because we were just talking about The Last
Star
Jedi.
Wars, yes.
That's awesome, and Rogue One and all Star Wars stuff. She's a rebellion built on hope and has vowed to use her powers only for good.
So she can't be turned to the dark side?
She can't be turned to the dark side, and then that would ask me, why is she on this podcast? Jennifer, welcome to the Monkey Business. We love having you on board, and we appreciate your time. How you doing today?
I am doing great this morning. Thank you so much for having me on. I love that you guys are already talking about Star Wars.
See, I'm one of the few people. Actually, Billy and I were old enough to have seen it in the theater when the original movie came out. Sherry and Tom. Oh, I did.
I was 5.
You were 5.
Me too.
5? Oh, that's right. You're only 2 years younger than I am. Okay, that's amazing.
Oh, I was 12.
But yeah, Star Wars is that global cultural phenomenon. And I'm actually, we just did a podcast last week where we reviewed The Last Jedi.
And we didn't even touch.
We didn't touch on a lot. We
that
really did kind of skim the surface of it.
Whatever the name of that planet was.
The Salt Planet?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to be talked about in that particular movie. And we're going to get to that in time. But we want to introduce you to our listeners. So, and I always say this to people when I'm doing an interview, I love a good origin story, being a comic book nerd myself. So my first question is, have you always been a geek, Jennifer? And how did you figure out, how did you come to that? How did that whole thing evolve into, this is where I want to be?
Oh, well, that is a very long story.
Good.
I'm old enough to see Star Wars in the theater myself.
Good deal.
Yeah, I mean, I have always been, people always ask me, have you always been a geek or have you always been a feminist? And I say yes to both, but before I had ways to label or define those things. It's always definitely been part of my identity. You know, I was raised by baby boomers who were some of the, the first generation to really consume and internalize popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I grew up watching the original Star Trek with my dad,
Cool.
and my mom would give me all of the gossip from People magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd play records for me. And so I had this appreciation for popular culture, and it definitely skewed towards some of the weirder stuff, the deeper, more reflective content like the Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And then being a child of the 70s, of course, we were so spoiled by amazing superhero and fantasy television, both live action and animated.
Right.
And so, so it started very young for me. I never knew that it would end up being something that I would get to work with as an adult, though. That was sort of the unknown call to adventure that ended up happening.
I'm with you. If like 5-6 years ago somebody said, "Oh, by the way, Chris, we're looking forward to the comic book convention and podcast you guys are about to start," I would have looked at them really funny, going,
What?
"No, that's not a reality. That's not a thing." And now here I am. So yeah, I can relate to that. Tell me a bit more. Let's jump into that seems to be the kind of like the hallmark project that Sherry has talked about the most, and ink-stained Amazons. I want to hear more about this.
What would you like to know?
Well, first of all, how long have you been working on that? Is this it was a book? It's a book. And how long ago did you write that book?
The book was published in 2010.
Okay.
So this is further part of the my hero's journey.
Okay.
Was I moved to Seattle January 1997, so 21 years ago.
Wow.
This month, and from the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up going back to college in my late 20s. I was 27 years old, and I was in this amazing program at the University of Washington called the Program in the Comparative History of Ideas. And it was a lot of returning adult students.
Okay.
It was a lot of self-directed, community-based, reflective study. And so while I was there, or even before I started, I knew I wanted to do something with mythology, because storytelling and the collective unconscious and the hero's journey, that was all really fascinating and important and resonant to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also interested in looking at it from a feminist lens. But the thing is, in ancient world mythology or classic world mythology, there aren't a lot of female heroes.
True.
They fill other worlds. They're not going on the journey. And so I discovered Buffy the Vampire Slayer and fell deeply in love with that show and realized this is how I do it. I look at modern mythology. And so for my senior thesis, my advisor suggested that I write my thesis as a book proposal for a book looking at the history of female super and action heroines in film, comics, and television. So that's the origin story of my career and of, as it is today, and of the book.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. So then tell me a little bit more about Ink-Stained Amazons, because I have a stack of books that is literally, I think, 4.5 feet tall next to my desk at home that I always intend to get to, but I haven't had a chance to read. So I'm guilty of the fact that this is, when I have an author on the phone with me, I have not, more often than not, actually gotten a chance to read the book that they are, that's the flagship product or that first moment of that. So tell me more about Ink-Stained Amazons. What is it basically a documentary of the observations?
Yeah, I think so. The first part is a history, starting from the 1930s to present day, and the kind of female characters from the 30s and 40s, 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, until the time the book was finished, which I'll get to the finished part in a second. Looking how they resonate with social mores and political norms of each time.
Okay.
So you see really strong female characters like Wonder Woman out being independent in the 1940s, and it's very reflective of wartime propaganda in the United States. And then in the 1950s, when there was propaganda for women, middle-class white women who'd gone out into the public work sphere, how they were supposed to go back home because the men were coming home and they wanted their jobs back. And you see Wonder Woman become more of a romance comic. And so how these norms are reflected, like the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s. And, you know, again, I'm using Wonder Woman, but her being on the cover of Ms. Magazine and being framed as a feminist icon. Girl power in the 1990s. And then when I turned in my book for publication, it was at a time where there were a real dearth of female heroes.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of exciting because everything I end up exploring later throughout the book, the female hero journey, which is the second part of the book, what are the themes that tend to show up in representations of a woman going on a hero journey. And then the third part, what it looks like when women are influencing myth-making, when they're the ones telling and producing the stories. It's really exciting to see that right now with characters like Rey in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, or Furiosa and The Wives, all of the incredible female characters that have come out leading film and television over the past 5 years. It's been kind of exciting to see those themes. It's like, oh, that's everything I was talking about like 10 years ago.
These people are finally catching up to you, Jennifer. You mentioned Wonder Woman, and so my curiosity is this: what's your opinion of the current permutation of the character? I mean, with Gal Gadot taking her onto the big screen, how are you feeling about that?
Oh, the Patty Jenkins Gal Gadot Wonder Woman was unbelievably amazing. I mean, I as soon as the film was over, I posted a picture of myself on Facebook in tears and said, yes, I'm a middle-aged woman in the back of a midday screening of Wonder Woman by myself, sobbing in the theater. And I thought it was just going to be me because this topic of the female hero journey has been so important to me.
Right.
And then I began to see just how incredibly resonant it was for women to see a character that taps into their feelings and desires and curiosity depicted on screen, and see her being physically active and not objectified. And I thought it was so extraordinary. It went above and beyond my expectations, barring some like superhero overblown stuff in the third act. It was incredible.
My wife had a similar sort of emotional reaction to Wonder Woman, where she was so glad to see a woman hero just sort of expanded on like that, as opposed to at a Comic-Con a year or two ago, we spoke with Gail Simone, a comic book writer who coined the term women in refrigerators, or the website.
Okay.
Which, are you familiar with that, Jennifer? The women in refrigerators?
Gail's a friend of mine. I'd like to say she's a Gail. I know Gail. I do talk about women in refrigerators in the book. Yeah.
Where, for Chris and Tanya and Sherry who may not know, it refers to a Green Lantern story where Kyle Raniere comes home and finds his girlfriend in a refrigerator.
Okay.
And basically, it sort of explores the topic how female characters in comic books had been treated, devalued over the course of time. And do you feel now it's gotten way better, a little better, some better, not better at all than when Gail originally took on sort of her Women in Refrigerators website?
Yeah. So yeah, and just to expand on that, it's the purpose of the female character, the love interest, was there to spur a moment in the male hero's journey. So when Alexandra DeWitt was cut up and put in the refrigerator, and Green Lantern came home and found her, it motivated him to take on his villain, right? That it spurred him to action. So she was just a plot point in his story. It's gotten somewhat better. I think, I've been thinking about this. People ask me, it's amazing that this is still a media literacy term that we use, women in refrigerators, to refer to women being a plot point. I've seen the same sort of trope in recent years referred to as Trinity syndrome. So, like, Trinity in The Matrix is never as extraordinary throughout the series as she is when we're first introduced to her, and she ultimately ends up dying. And she's not the hero in the story. It's not her story. It's Neo's story, right? But what was so interesting about Wonder Woman was that Steve Trevor was a fully formed character. He wasn't necessarily a plot point, but then he did die at the end of the movie, and to fill Wonder Woman's story. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant because Diana was allowed to have a romance, but the romance didn't define her, and she wasn't subsumed by it.
That was something I had noticed as well. And I'm looking at that movie in hindsight, and I really thought that was a very refreshing change to see. The love interest was not just a foil, not just a kind of like an accessory.
I read an article.
Right.
I read an article like pretty soon after I saw Wonder Woman, and it was that Steve Trevor was the perfect superhero girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. And I have to apologize, and I know she's probably not listening to this particular podcast, but Gal Gadot. I keep seeing her last name and thinking of the play Waiting for Godot, so that's how I pronounce it. And I'm told the T has to be pronounced, and so I feel bad. And I hear Jennifer say that, and I'm like, oh God, that's right. I'm mispronouncing her name. Anyway, not that I'm in any risk of actually upsetting.
I practice it too.
What's that?
I said I practice it too.
Okay, see, there we go. I don't feel so bad now. I'm in good company.
No.
So that's great. Okay, so
I'm definitely going to purchase this book.
Oh, absolutely. I have like I said, I have a stack of books that I intend to read before the end of 2018.
We're going to push over the rest of those books so you can actually read this one
That's
first.
fine. Put
Jennifer,
it right at the
top. When I first contacted you, this is Sherry, by the way.
Hi.
When I first contacted you, I mentioned that your name had come up because of this book, because my daughter, both in high school and college, wrote research papers about different aspects of female superheroes, and she liberally quoted you in both papers.
She did properly cite you, if that's
She did properly cite you. I made sure of that. It's an excellent book. It's a really wonderful book, and I really thank you for writing it. It's really just phenomenal.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
And I see, we were just talking about this. Like I said, I make a lot of references to last week because we were doing our discussion of The Last Jedi. And we were talking about how in the general global consciousness, Star Wars is so ingrained around the world that the ability to make a perfect Star Wars movie no longer exists. Because there's just so many, there's like 6 billion opinions out there. You can't satisfy all of them. And it led to a brief touch on what we've collectively called nerd rage. How the geeks, they just get all up in arms and they get angry about these various things, and how nerd rage has become this palpable creature in our culture, in our especially in the geek world, and it's led to things like Gamergate and just a lot of just a serious chunk of negativity. How do you see projects like Inkstained Amazon? I'm just knocking my own microphone wrong. Excuse me. How like Inkstained Amazons and some of your other projects, like Geek Girl Con, which I'm going to ask you about a little bit more in the very near future, in the next few minutes. But how do you see stuff like that? Do you see it as like combating this, or do you see it like, I'm just going to put this out there? This is the lighthouse. This is going to guide people to this conversation.
It's the latter. For me, it's the latter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really interested in getting into a combat with somebody. And it's interesting to see sort of disappointed reactions to cultural touchstone such as Star Wars. I don't know if it's ever been perfect for everybody, but there is such a massive following now that there wasn't, obviously, in the 1970s.
Right.
And there are more ways to immediately communicate with people about and dissect a film than there were in the 70s and 80s. I have some friends who were part of Star Wars and Star Trek fandom in the early 1980s, and they wrote letters to each other and printed zines on mimeographs. And so there were months in between conversations. So now any sort of disappointment is amplified.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets reported on by somebody, and, a writer captures a bunch of tweets that express, anger regarding the film. But what I have seen is an extraordinary number of women really taking to, particularly The Last Jedi, but as well, The Force Awakens as well. And so it's interesting to me to see, I feel like these last two Star Wars films, the last three, including Rogue One, have really been Star Wars films directed at female audiences. So I'm really interested in exploring that. As far as nerd rage goes, oh boy, there's a lot tied up in there.
Yeah,
culturally.
It is amazing.
Geek culture has changed a lot in the past 10 years due to organizations and movements like Geek Girl Con. But I will wait until you ask me about that.
Okay. Well, and then we're going to jump right into it. But you know what? I just had a quick thought that I jotted down on my pad because we were talking about it, and you were mentioning your reaction to Wonder Woman, and how you use Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a basis for a lot of your approach. So I'm going to ask you about what the other, the entertainment juggernaut, the Marvel Universe. How do you feel how they've handled things? Because there are a lot of people who point to Black Widow and how she has been so misused in some cases. She's always been kind of that secondary. She's always been a supporting character. Do you feel that that's a disservice, or has that kind of shown the importance of female characters? And then, of course, now Marvel is leaning towards its evolution. It's brought in a lot more. It's brought in, Scarlet Witch, and it's going to have Captain Marvel coming up pretty soon. But I want to hear your opinion on Black Widow.
On Black Widow specifically, I think she's a fascinating character. I think Scarlett Johansson plays her really well. I do think that she has been more sidelined. In a cast of a bazillion.
Yeah.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe in film, the female characters have not been as interesting to me, or I found them disappointing. Like Gamora ends up being a love interest and mother figure versus, a character who's badass in her own right.
Right.
On television, it's a totally different experience. The Agent Carter, Jessica Jones. That there are these all of the women on Luke Cage, which ended up being a show about incredible women.
Yes.
Not necessarily about Cage. You see these much more nuanced, deep female explorations of power and abuse and authority and
So the silver screen folks have kind of gotten a little bit more in depth on it, but the big screen folks need to learn a lesson from the Netflix team.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I with you. I discovered Buffy the Vampire Slayer when she came out in the '90s too. And the one thing I'm going to add to that conversation is my favorite quote is a Joss Whedon. You've probably heard this. I would assume at this point, where somebody asked him one time during an interview, "Why do you continually draw up these amazingly strong female characters?" And his response was, "Because you keep asking that question."
Right.
It's until this becomes just as much the norm as everything else, then we're always going to put a spotlight on it, and I think that's it's needed. It's something that just needs to happen. Now, so with that all being said, and that observation out in the open there, and I'm going to ask you about Geek Girl Con, and you were on the board. You were the board president of Geek Girl Con. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm actually a co-founder.
Okay.
So there was a panel at San Diego Comic-Con in 2010 that was put together by Kristen Riley of the what was then called the Geek Girls Network, and she'd also organized Tweet Up to be held off-site during the convention. And this panel it came out of a conversation that was happening on the internet between Jill Pantozzi and Geek Girl Diva, and women who are finding each other in this digital space, and who were sort of absent from the physical spaces because they were so gate-kept at the time.
Oh, geez.
And so this panel happened. It was marvelously popular. Someone based in Seattle afterwards said, "Hey, we should have a Geek Girl Con." And I contacted her, and we put together some meetings locally. And over the next year and a half, people came on to volunteer. Community members helped us out. We did lots of local, small word-of-mouth events. We did some online events. And then in fall of 2011, we had our first convention it was held at Seattle Center, right near the Space Needle.
Wow.
And the people at the Museum of Popular Culture, it was then called EMP, donated some of their space to us. Got Jane Essenson up here. Gail Simone was here. Trina Robbins, Greg Rucka and Jen Van Meter were here. Chase Masterson brought herself up from L.A. She had been on Deep Space Nine.
As leader.
And we had 2,500 people come and sold out for the very first convention.
That's phenomenal.
And this year was our 7th con. So we're up to they are up. I'm no longer with the organization officially. They are up to about 11,000 annual attendees.
That's phenomenal.
We need to talk to them.
Yeah, seriously. We're putting our third show together. It'll be this June here in Rochester, New York, and we've been averaging 2,000 at the gate for our first 2 shows, so we're starting to hope to really kind of evolve that. So, yeah, our hats off, because we know what kind of an effort it takes to put on an event like that.
There's 292 days, 8 hours, and 43 minutes until Geek Girl Con 2018.
Okay. So that gives me plenty of time to plan and go to the West Coast.
I'm on the website.
Tanya's usually parked in front of a computer. She's the one who does most of our on-the-fly research while we're in the middle of conversations.
Gotcha. So, it's fascinating to you see all of this nerd rage happening online, for sure.
Right.
And over the past, since 2010, over the past 8 years, we've seen so many different movements in geek culture and con culture that are combining fandom and identity politics. And so you're seeing Blurred, you're seeing Racialicious and Angry Asian Man, you're seeing Black Girl Nerds, people coming out and claiming space within what was, stereotypically seen as a schlubby comic book guy type culture, which it wasn't, because there's always been many identities within geek culture, and geek culture has always been driven by women. And fandom culture has been driven by women. But 10 years ago at Comic-Con, you didn't see a lot of women on the show floor. You didn't see a lot of women on panels. It was like 10 guys and Gail Simone on the DC panel. And the women that you saw on the show floor were booth babes. Yeah. Which ended up being kind of an intimidating experience. This past summer, when I was down there on preview night, I was on the show floor and I saw a little girl. She's probably about 9, and she squealed, ran over to the Quark Books booth because there was a big poster of Sam Magg's book, Fangirl's Guide to the Galaxy. Oh, wow. And she squealed and she said, Fangirl's Guide to the Galaxy? Oh, my God. I love girl geek. I started bawling. I go hug this little girl. No, I shouldn't go hug this little girl. Like the culture has changed so much to be more inclusive that necessarily, mostly because of dollars, like, industries are going to have to start catering more to female audiences.
I think. Go ahead, Billy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to change the topic just a little bit because I want her take on something we've debated in the past.
Yeah.
Princess Leia, recast, or what did they do with her in the next Star Wars episode?
Oh, see.
Put her on the spot, Billy.
Pre-Last Jedi, pre-watching it, I didn't want it to be recast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still uncomfortable with that. But I'm so sad that we won't get the Leia movie. You know, this most recent trilogy was supposed to be the Han, Luke, Leia film, and now I don't know what that will look like, and I feel like we've been, robbed of that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it won't be an extraordinary movie. It doesn't mean that Rey or other female characters won't be brought in. Rose, Psycho, to fill what feels like a void right now.
My opinion
What do you think?
Go ahead. Well, my opinion from the word go, soon after Carrie Fisher passed away, we were doing a conversation about that, and from the word go, I have been of the opinion that because the character is so important to the mythology, that in order to do the character justice, I feel that you probably should have to recast the part, at least for this one movie, with everybody acknowledging that if Carrie Fisher were alive, she would play the part. That's just a given thing. But the character has become more than just the actress who played her. And so the importance of that personality, the importance of that person to the story and to what it means to kind of like the whole Star Wars cultural phenomenon is I feel that you should be able to give Leia her chance in lieu of Carrie's passing. That's just always been my opinion from the word go.
And we've decided it should be the second Becky from Roseanne.
There you go. That's not what we came up with. No, it's not.
Wow, you're like.
But the thing is, oh, go ahead.
No, Billy's ready to push buttons today. He's trying.
I'm just trying to make myself laugh.
Yeah, that's it. No, he's doing a good job of it too. And I went so far as go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just, to finish my point that I had said on a couple of podcasts already. I said, Star Wars is very good at finding the diamonds in the rough, the up-and-coming talent, the people who might not have made a name for themselves, and then giving them the spotlight and giving them that opportunity to become this thing, or part of this thing. And so, but I'm thinking in this case, if they were to recast Princess Leia, General Leia, that you would have to kind of go opposite that, and you would have to bring in a ringer. I think you just for this type of a thing, just because of the momentous nature, and to do Carrie Fisher at least a little bit of honor, you can't bring in a no-name, veteran stage actress. I think you have to go in and you have to get somebody like Helen Mirren, Judi Dench, somebody like that who can come in and carry that presence. But that's entirely my opinion, so which people have been arguing with me about pretty consistently. So
yeah. I think there's an online petition right now to cast Meryl Streep. There's also an online petition from people who want from dudes who want the film removed from canon. Which
that's the most ridiculous.
It is the single most ridiculous thing I've seen yet. Was that petition? And I, guys, just grow a pair and relax a little bit. It's amazing.
Right,
to me.
right. So, but as far as Carrie Fisher goes, she has become you can't separate her from the role. I mean, It would be so hard to do that. And, Carrie Fisher has been an icon for decades. And in her death, she's ascended to being this goddess. Right?
Oh, yeah. Hands down.
She's been embraced so much in fan culture, especially in the past year, and in one of the things that I'm working on right now is looking at geek activism, and how geeks were hacking popular culture and harnessing popular culture in their political movements. And you've seen both Leia and Carrie Fisher and the women of Star Wars co-opted as icons of this current Me Too movement and the Women's March. And so I think, because of the political moment, it would also be really difficult to separate that out, because Leia is Fisher and vice versa.
Which I completely I understand and agree with to a degree. And believe me when I tell you that when I use the sentence "we should recast the part," I do it with great trepidation, but it's just in my head. It feels like the only logical way to approach it. But I understand the pitfalls and the minefield that you're walking through, and especially because Sherry sits right next to me when we podcast.
She's within arm's reach,
and she's within arm's reach, and she disagrees with me passionately, and so there are times where I expect that I'm going to say something and I'm going to get whacked for it. So I'm pretty sure. Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I've been saying to people, I know this is awful and really unfair, but I'm very mad at Carrie Fisher for dying.
Yes, there we go. It would have been so easy. But I do appreciate a lot of, as we said last week, this is a no-win situation for Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams. Whatever they come up with, and it'll be brilliant, and they'll come up with something very respectful and hopefully at a really good depth to the story. And so I respect the fact that they're going to do the best they can to make the best decision, but they are up against a really ugly-looking brick wall. And so whatever they come up with is just going to be a challenge to play with. But you do the best you can.
All right.
So
on that note,
on that happy and pious note, I have been dying to ask this question because ever since I saw it pop up in the introduction, it's been on my mind, and I don't get to. I swear often, but I usually get like people wagging their finger at me. But I get to say "bitch media" today, and I get to say it with legitimate reasons. So tell me more about Bitch Media, a Girl on Film series. What is that? Where can we find it? And tell us about how it's coming along.
Oh, well, that was that was before the book was published.
Oh, really? So this is like one of your first projects?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, one of my first projects. Bitch Media was something that, it's so funny. I was standing in City Lights Books in 1996, which is City Lights Books is in San Francisco in North Beach, and is famous for publishing literature and poetry written by the Beats. And on the shelves with all of the zines and alt magazines, I saw Bitch magazine. And I didn't buy it because I was 21 and didn't have a lot of money. And but I bought the next issue, when I got up to Seattle and was making some cash. And thought it was so incredibly brilliant. It's the feminist response to popular culture. They do media literacy, media criticism through an intersectional feminist lens of popular culture. And I always wanted to write for them, and ended up getting this gig by pitching them. I pitched them a piece on Quentin Tarantino and how he was, at that time, the piece was about how he was an accidental feminist, that I don't think he was intentionally making feminist films, and yet people were drawing inspiration and empowerment from movies like Kill Bill and characters like Beatrix Kiddo. And they said, hey, would you want to do the 6 or 8 week series on exploring this topic? And so I kind of got to write whatever I wanted. And since then, I've written for the magazine and for the website, and even had a cover story on Geek Girls and women in fandom and the evolution of that. Bitch is amazing, and everybody should subscribe to it, basically.
Okay. Hey, I'll take that advice. That's
It's
good
excellent.
by me.
It's an excellent.
I've heard you talk about it on several occasions, Cher Bear. So that's definitely something that is on the radar. So we've kind of successfully dipped into your past projects. Is there anything you're working on right now that's on the future, on the horizon?
Yes, indeed. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'm going to be leading a workshop at the Granger Leadership Academy, which is put on by the Harry Potter Alliance.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
So I'm looking forward to that. I'm leading an event at SIF Cinema. SIF is the Seattle International Film Festival, and they have a film center, and they do an educational series. So I'm doing a half-day event looking at the history of Wonder Woman on film. We'll be looking at animated versions, We might be looking at the Wonder Woman pilot from a few years ago that was so terrible. We'll be looking at Linda Carter and Kathy Lee Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm doing a deep dive into a 3-night class called Amazons and Other Ass Kickers, and it's looking at the evolution of superheroines on film.
Awesome.
And then I'm also doing work. I have a project on geektivism. I'm working on a book proposal for basically what I was talking about earlier, how folks are using popular culture in their resistance movement.
Okay.
And activist campaigns and civic engagement. So I have a little website up. I have a place-holding website up right now called geektivism.com,
Mm-hmm.
and people can sign up for when there's more information out about that.
Okay. Very cool. I'm jotting that down right now. Geektivism.com.
I'm very excited about it.
Now, when do you see something like it, you say you got a placeholder right now? Do you have a timeline right now as to when that will actually kind of go full on out in the open live?
No. Well, it is live, but it's just not.
Okay.
It's not quite ready yet. I'm still working out the details of what it's going to look like.
Gotcha. Geektivism.com. All right, so keep an eye on. We're going to keep an eye on that, and with great anticipation. You know, I'm hoping that we can get our act together. We might not be able to get you out here in 2018, but we would love to have you come out to Flower City Comic Con and do a presentation for our fans and ticket holders. That'd be awesome to have you in town.
When is your con?
This year it's in June 9th and 10th. But in 2019, it's probably going to be moving back into its customary spot in April.
April, yeah. Okay.
We'll keep
Fun.
you posted.
Yeah, tell me. I don't know. Tell me more about it. Your con looked like it had a strong educational component.
We do. Like the first convention, we've done 2 shows so far. The first one we did, it had actual like local college professors. We have one lady who works at the University of Rochester who was actually creator of the character of Barclay for Star Trek Next Generation. And she wrote a couple of the scripts for episodes that he was featured in. So she came in and ran the Star Trek panel. We have another individual who is a professor at the Finger Lakes Community College, which is near here. And she came in and did an hour-and-a-half presentation on Harry, Hobbits, and there was another H word in there. But it was the look at the modern mythology. And we do have professors at Monroe Community College that teach art and graphic art and comic book structure and things like that. So they came in and we have a professorial bent. We have like people come in and teach and educate, and we like to expose the people who come to a variety of different things, stuff that you wouldn't normally see at a Comic-Con, to try and open eyes and get the imaginations running.
Cool, very cool.
So we pat ourselves on the back. We've been fairly successful at it over 2 shows so far. We'll see what we pull together for the third. This one might be coming out of its hat at this point. We're not sure. We're winging it at this point for the third one, but so far it's starting to come together.
It's where we bring it all together.
It's our slogan, where we bring it all together.
I know that feeling well.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Exactly. That's the thing is how do we continue bringing awareness? How do we continue? I mean, because geek culture really has become the mainstream. It used to be the behind the scenes, the underground. It wasn't cool to be a geek, but now it's becoming cool to be a geek. And how do we make it more universal? And I really feel it's happened so quickly that a lot of the stuff we've talked about, the nerd rage and whatnot, has been enhanced growing pains because things have been onsetting so fast. But where do we go? Do we just keep that message strong? Is there something we need to kind of like really put a spotlight on? Just hold the course? What do you think, Jennifer?
What's the? Can you rephrase the question?
I can. I didn't even honestly.
I didn't think there was a question in there.
When I started that sentence, I didn't even know where it was going. To be honest,
is it going to stay strong, or is it eventually going to?
Is it going to peter out?
Yeah.
Do we need to?
Are we going to go back to the little groups of just
the cliques, the clusters?
Yeah. I don't think to jump in. I don't think that we're going to just go backwards into the geek clusters and things like that, where they had the nerds in the basement gaming thing, because it's. Shut up, Sherry.
It's because we are nerds in the basement gaming.
Yes, we are nerds in the basement
every
gaming.
other Sunday.
But it's coming out and being more as the norm. Especially with the geek culture being more normal.
Yeah, but how, with geek culture becoming so mainstream, how do we continue making sure that every aspect about it is focused on equally? Making sure that no one. I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Don't kill my character this afternoon, and then we'll be fine.
That's in debate at this point. I'm the dungeon master. I get to say what happens.
I think what you're trying.
Help me out, Sherry, please.
I think what Chris is trying to say is this geek activism that you're doing so much with. As Chris and I are both parents of teenage daughters, and I know we worry about them because they're both geeks.
Oh yeah.
And how do we just keep things so that it doesn't go back to this whole idea of it's just about white males?
I don't want the return of the damsel in distress. How do we stop that? That's basically what I guess to bottom line it.
I think that, there are a couple of different questions there. I think that I think it's important for people to keep visibly and vocally participating in the culture. And I think that it's important for different identities to be creating the culture, whether that's participating in fan phenomena or being in industry, right? We need to see more people of color, more LGBTQ people, more women, and different intersections of these identities, creating stories that people can relate to. And that will help keep the culture flourishing and progressive and inclusive.
Are you familiar with Con or Bust?
Yes.
Yes. Connor. Yes.
Yeah, we're trying to become more active, involved with Con or Bust.
That's through Geek Girl Con. They had a thing in regards to Con or Bust, so that's why I was able to answer yes.
One of our first interviews with Marco Shiro, who apparently is heavily involved with Con or Bust, and he was one who brought it to our attention.
Yeah. So for your listeners,
please,
Con or Bust. I can't remember the name of their overhead, or who they fall under, but they provide passes to cons for people of color who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend them.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that's a great way that's a great thing overall. I love the way that it's helping bring people to the culture. It's kind of like an invitation in. It's great.
Well, and these events, one of the things that when GeekGirlCon was fairly new, I kept thinking, a question I kept asking myself and other people was, when we're trying to create this change and trying to create these inclusive spaces, does it make more sense to have, niche events, or does it make more sense to claim space within, like, San Diego Comic-Con, which is 150,000 people. And I think you need to do a combination of both. And as you see, more diverse panels happening at these larger cons, simultaneously you're seeing smaller conventions pop up all over the place that have an identity politic to them, like FlameCon, which is put on by Geeks Out. It happens in Brooklyn every August and is amazing. Has an LGBTQ focus. There was just an Indigenous con for Native folks, Native geeks.
Really? That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, lives in New Mexico, I think. Jamie Broadnack, who founded Black Girl Nerds, is putting together Universal Fan Con for intersectional identities. It's for any fan. That's happening, I think this year. So yeah, you're seeing these. Gamer X was or is an organization that puts on an annual convention for gay gamers down in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, the culture has already changed, and even as commercially it's mainstream, there are also still these subcultures happening underneath the surface.
I think there's always going to be a subculture to something. That's no matter how prevalent something becomes, there's always going to be something underneath it that's going to help kind of get ready to morph it in the future. I think that's my opinion. I don't know. What do I know?
Right.
I know nothing. That's why I do these podcasts, so I can learn something too along the way.
And dead air.
Well, we've had there's a bit of a delay between Seattle and Rochester today. We got to respect that. Okay, so Jennifer, we're going to let you off the hook at this point. But
so how's the weather?
How's the weather in Seattle? Just so we know.
I think it's a lot better than the East Coast.
Yeah.
Is it above 10 degrees?
Yes.
Okay, then you're better off. Yeah, we've had a cold snap where the heat wave pushed us up to 7 yesterday.
Right now, we're currently at 15.
Well,
okay.
We've had some chilly days, and you're going to hate hearing this, where the sun is out and the mountains, the Cascades to one side and the Olympics to the other side are clear and gleaming with snow and just absolutely ridiculously beautiful.
You know what? I'll accept that, because as long as somebody is happy with the weather, I'm happy. That makes me have hope that in the future we will get out of this.
But can I tell you how happy I was to have a cold day on Friday? I didn't have to go into work because it was wind chills of negative 25.
Some of us, our day job, we work for the municipality, and we don't have an opportunity to take the day off.
And I'm on the radio. Radio never closes.
Radio never closes. City Hall never closes.
School's closed.
There you go. Jennifer, thank you for your time this afternoon. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was absolutely a delight talking to all of you.
As you can tell, we're still novices at giving interviews, and we appreciate your patience while we kind of bundled our way through. Well, no, not we, me.
You.
Me.
It's just you.
It's point the finger at me. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time, but that's part of my charm, from what I'm told.
Hold on, let me tip my head sideways.
But this has been Jennifer. Jennifer Stuller, author and conventioneer, and we're looking forward to hearing from you in the future. Hopefully, we'll be able to circle around and have another talk, and we'll actually sound like we're actually professional interviewers the next time. I promise.
Sounds great.
Well, if we can get her out in June, then you could be like the panel moderator, and then you have lots of times to practice and things like that.
And we look forward to seeing geektivism.com come to life and all other projects. So best of luck, and we appreciate your time. And for Billy and for Tanya, for Sherry and myself, we're going to say thank you and have a great rest of the day.
You as well. Thank you so much, and good luck with your con in June.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. All right, Billy, let's go ahead and hit that ridiculous music that you love so much. There it is. And this has been Monkey Business for another week, a product of the Mighty Monkey Corporation, purveyors and producers of the Flower City Comic-Con. Coming at you in 3D, June 9th and 10th at the Floriano Rochester Riverside Convention Center. Love us on Facebook, please, we beg you. And follow and subscribe to us on patreon.com, FC3ROC. And that's it for a week, and we will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.